She walked into the repair shop wearing old sneakers and a faded t-shirt, just asking for help. The mechanic laughed the moment she touched the engine. Customers watched, smirking and snickering. No one knew her name, no one knew her story, and absolutely no one knew who her mother was. What happened next shook the entire shop to its core. One by one, jaws dropped, because in less than 5 minutes she did the impossible and exposed a truth no one was ready for. Before we dive in, like this video and comment where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring you more powerful stories. Now, let's begin. The scorching midday sun beat down on the cracked pavement outside Jackson's Auto Service, a small but busy mechanic shop nestled in the heart of Atlanta. Inside, greasy hands moved expertly under lifted hoods while the harsh whir of power tools echoed off the concrete walls. It was the kind of place where regulars lingered, where crude jokes flew without apology, and where every mechanic thought they had seen it all. Until a young woman named Riley walked through the door. She was 22, slim, with her dark hair pulled into a low ponytail. She wore an oversized hoodie, jeans, and beat-up sneakers. At first, no one looked up. Just another customer, they figured. But then she walked straight toward the black Dodge Charger parked in the center of the bay, its hood wide open, drawing the attention of every man around it. A cluster of mechanics stood there, including Frank, the lead technician, a broad-shouldered man with oil-streaked arms and a laugh that usually followed someone else's mistake. Riley cleared her throat. "Excuse me, that's my brother's car. He said it stalled this morning. I came to check it out." Frank barely glanced at her. He chuckled, wiping his hands on a filthy rag. "Oh, really? You came to fix it?" His eyes scanned her head to toe, clearly unimpressed. "What are you gonna do, little lady? Pray over the engine?" The other mechanics burst into laughter. A few customers chuckled from the waiting area. Riley didn't flinch. She took a step forward and looked at the engine like it was something she'd seen 1,000 times. Do you mind if I take a look?" she asked, her tone calm but firm. Frank raised an eyebrow, grinning. "Be my guest. You break something, you pay for it." He stepped aside with a mocking bow. Without a word, Riley leaned in. Her fingers moved across the engine with quiet confidence. Within seconds, her brow furrowed. "This hose is loose," she said, "and the distributor caps misaligned." Frank folded his arms. "Oh, is that so?" Riley pulled a compact toolkit from her backpack. Suddenly, the clanging of wrenches stopped. The air in the shop thickened with tension. People watched closely, unsure whether they were about to witness a total disaster or an unexpected miracle. She adjusted the cap, tightened the hose, then gently tapped the starter. She turned to Frank. "Try it now." He let out a skeptical laugh, but climbed into the car and turned the key. The engine roared to life. Gasps echoed through the shop. A socket wrench clattered to the ground. Frank stared at the dashboard, speechless. Riley stepped back, dusting her hands off on her jeans. "I told you," she said quietly. "It's my brother's car." But what no one in that shop realized, not Frank, not the smirking customers, not even the quiet intern in the back, was that her mother had once built engines for NASA. And Riley, she had grown up in that world, learning from the best. The silence was almost eerie. People glanced at one another, unsure what to say. Riley didn't offer an explanation, didn't smile or brag. She simply closed the hood and latched it with practiced precision. Frank's fingers trembled slightly as he stepped out of the car. The sound of the engine still echoed in his ears, but it was nothing compared to the storm building in his mind. Everyone had seen it. Riley didn't guess. She didn't hesitate. She had fixed what certified mechanics couldn't solve in over an hour. And she'd done it like it was second nature. "Lucky guess," Frank muttered, trying to salvage his ego as he walked away from the car. Riley didn't respond. She simply secured the latch, each movement deliberate and efficient. Her hands moved like she had memorized every bolt and hose of that vehicle years ago. Pua, Dylan, the youngest mechanic and a recent intern, leaned toward Frank and whispered, "She's not normal, man. Did you see the way she looked at that engine?" Frank shot him a warning glare. "You saw nothing. She probably tampered with it before bringing it in. A setup, just a trick." Riley heard it all but said nothing. As she turned to leave, a woman intercepted her, a middle-aged professional dressed in business casual with sharp, curious eyes. "Excuse me," she said. "I'm Karen Morris. I work at an engineering firm down the block." That was impressive. "Have you ever worked on vehicles professionally?" Riley offered a polite smile. "No, ma'am. I just grew up around machines." Karen lifted an eyebrow, intrigued. "Your instincts are better than most of the engineers I know." Before Riley could respond, Frank clapped loudly, trying to break the tension. "All right, everyone calm down. She fixed a hose and turned a cap. Doesn't make her Einstein. This is a garage, not a NASA test site." At that, Riley turned. Her voice was still steady, but her words sliced through the room like a blade. "My mother would disagree." Frank laughed dismissively. "Oh yeah? Who's your mother? Another backyard tinkerer?" Riley stepped forward, her gaze locked on his. "Her name is Dr. Evelyn Rowe, Chief Propulsion Engineer for Artemis IV. She designed the backup thruster systems for the lunar module. I used to sit under tables in her lab playing with tools while she met with NASA officials." The silence was instant. Karen's mouth parted slightly. Even Dylan looked like he had seen a ghost. Frank's expression froze. He had heard that name. Everyone in the engineering world had. Evelyn Rowe was a legend. And now her daughter stood before him, wrench in hand, after being laughed out of the shop. A customer pulled out his phone and started recording. Karen was the first to speak again. "Would you ever consider joining an engineering team? I could make a call, just coffee, no pressure." Riley glanced at her watch. "I appreciate it, but I came from my brother's car. I wasn't trying to prove anything." She turned to leave, and this time, no one dared stop her. No more laughter, no more mocking, just silence, and eyes that now saw her in a completely different light. Frank rubbed the back of his neck, swallowing his pride, but something else stirred inside him, something darker than embarrassment. It wasn't over, not even close, because Frank wasn't the kind of man to let a girl, no matter who her mother was, walk into his world and make him look like a fool, not without consequences. And Riley had no idea what storm was already forming behind her. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the blinds of Riley's modest kitchen. The smell of toast filled the room as her phone buzzed repeatedly on the counter. It lit up with messages from unknown numbers, videos, screenshots, links. It had taken less than 12 hours. The video clip had gone viral. Girl fixes car in seconds. Mechanic stunned when she reveals who her mother is. Her fingers hovered over the screen. Thousands of likes, hundreds of comments. Some were impressed, some were cruel, but all of them were watching. Riley sighed and set the phone face down. She never wanted attention. She fixed things, quietly. No drama. But the world didn't always care what you wanted. Across town, Frank sat in his office watching the same video, jaw clenched and face red. The comments hit him like acid. "That mechanic should be fired. She made the whole garage look like fools. Never judge a book by its cover." Frank slammed his hands on the desk. "No one's gonna remember her name after today." He stormed into the garage. "Listen up," he barked. "That girl embarrassed us. Now people think we're amateurs. From now on, no one talks to her. No attention. You want to play smart? Let's see how she handles being ignored." The crew nodded, though some looked uneasy. Dylan kept his head down. He admired Riley. She didn't gloat. She didn't rub it in. She just did it. But challenging Frank was a risk no one dared take. Later that day, Riley returned to pick up her brother's keys. As she stepped into the shop, The room went still. No greetings, no glances, just a wall of silence. She walked to the counter where the receptionist normally smiled. Today, the woman slid the keys across the surface without a word. Riley paused. She looked around. Every eye turned away. She understood instantly. She said nothing, just turned and walked out. But outside, someone was waiting. Karen Morris stood by a sleek silver car. "I had a feeling you'd come back," she said. "I know this might sound odd, but I spoke with someone. My firm's director. He wants to meet you. Just coffee. No pressure." Riley hesitated. Karen smiled gently. "You're talented, Riley. And I've lived in this town long enough to recognize when someone's trying to bury a light that makes them feel small." Riley turned her head toward the shop. Through the glass, she could see the same men who once laughed now hiding behind silence. She didn't say anything. But her silence spoke louder than any wrench ever could. And the storm wasn't done. "Not yet." "Okay," she said softly. "Coffee sounds good." They drove off, the car disappearing into the distance. But inside the shop, Frank stood behind the window, eyes burning with a cold, growing rage. He watched them go, jaw clenched, fists tightening at his sides. He had underestimated her once. That mistake would not happen again. What he planned next would not involve silence. It would be louder, crueler, and far more destructive. 3 days later, Riley walked through the glass doors of a towering downtown office building, her heart thudding against her ribcage. Everything around her felt like a different universe. Polished marble floors gleaming under soft lights. Sleek desks occupied by professionals in tailored suits moving with sharp precision. It was intimidating, surreal. She had been invited here by Morrison Keene Engineering, one of the top engineering firms in the state. What had started as an after-hours fix on a broken car engine had somehow led her to this moment. A meeting with the firm's lead director, Russell Keene, a man known for building infrastructure projects that touched every corner of the country. Inside a quiet, glass-walled conference room, Russell stood waiting. In his early 50s, tall and sharply dressed, he had the presence of someone who didn't need to raise his voice to command a room. His gray-streaked hair and calculating eyes spoke of experience, of battles fought and won not in trenches, but on blueprints in boardrooms. As Riley entered, he extended a hand toward her. "You must be Riley," he said, his tone warm but deliberate. "I've heard quite a bit about you." Riley shook his hand firmly. "Thank you for the invitation, sir." He gestured for her to sit across from him. "Let me be honest," he began. "When I first saw the video of what you built in that garage, I didn't believe it. Thought it was edited. Too clean, too precise. But then I called Evelyn Rowe." Riley straightened at her mother's name. "She told me you started working with circuits at age 10. Riley nodded with a soft smile. "I was always curious. She let me experiment. Sometimes even with things she probably shouldn't have." Russell chuckled. "That kind of curiosity is gold. We're building a new prototype, an energy module for distributed storage systems. I want you on the team. I can't offer a full salary yet, but it's a paid internship. You'll have full access, full mentorship, full exposure." For a moment, Riley just stared at him, stunned. Then she smiled, genuine and proud. "I would love that." But across town, in a darkened office behind a shuttered window, Frank sat scrolling through social media posts, each one slicing deeper than the last. The garage's name had been dragged through the mud. Customers were vanishing. Some left nasty reviews, others just stopped showing up. But what finally pushed Frank to the edge wasn't the posts. It was the terse email from one of the financial partners who had helped fund the shop. "Your behavior has brought the shop negative attention. Either resolve this matter, or your position is in jeopardy." Frank's hands trembled with fury as he slammed his laptop shut. Humiliation was one thing. But now his money was on the line. His pride had already been bruised. But his wallet? That was sacred. He grabbed his phone and punched in a number. "I need that file," he said coldly into the receiver. "The one about Dr. Evelyn Rowe. The old scandal. Find it. I want to know what her daughter's hiding." On the other end, the voice hesitated. "That file was sealed years ago, classified. No one touches it." "Unseal it," Frank snapped. "I don't care what it takes. She humiliated me. Her mother humiliated me. I'm going to bury them both." That night, as the city lights flickered beyond her window, Riley sat cross-legged on her bed, reviewing prototype schematics on her tablet. The glow of innovation warmed her, but it was short-lived. Her phone buzzed. A message. Unknown number. "You think you can walk away from the shop and act like a hero? Wait till the world finds out your mother's secret." Her heart skipped. The words punched like cold air to the lungs. She had always known something had happened in her mother's past. Something never discussed. A scandal, a classified case, buried under years of legal silence. But she had never asked, and Evelyn had never told. A second message appeared. "You have one chance to disappear quietly, or I make this public." Riley stared at the screen. Fear flooded in, but something inside her stiffened, hardened. She stood up, grabbed her jacket, and walked out into the night air. Some stories needed to be told before others twisted them into weapons. If Frank wanted to dig up the past, he had no idea that the truth he was chasing could crack open far more than reputations. It could unravel everything. The wind cut across her face as she stood before the modest, weathered home of her childhood. The door, chipped and faded, felt heavier than it had in years. Inside, Evelyn sat in her favorite armchair, a cup of tea on the side table, the lamplight casting soft shadows across her face. She looked up as Riley entered, eyes scanning her daughter's face. She knew. Something was wrong. "They're threatening to expose you," Riley said quietly. "Frank found something. He's using it to shut me down." Evelyn set her cup down. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice was steady. Her eyes, though, carried the weight of history. "I always knew this would come back." Riley sat across from her, heart racing. "What happened, Mom? What's the truth?" Evelyn looked out the window, silent for a long moment, then spoke. "When I was your age, I worked for a military engineering firm. We handled top-secret contracts. One day, my team found a design flaw in an armored vehicle. Flaws that could cost lives. I reported it." Riley leaned forward. "And?" "They buried it," Evelyn said, her voice heavy. "Fixing it would have delayed $1 billion deal. So they shut it down. And when I refused to let it go, they turned it on me. Claimed I falsified data. Painted me as a threat. I was forced to sign an NDA under threat of federal prison. The case was sealed." Riley's breath caught in her throat. "So, you were right, and they ruined you." Evelyn nodded slowly. "I wasn't the first, but I refused to break. I walked away, started over. I promised myself no one would ever use my past to control my future, and I kept you far away from it all." Outside, the sound of a car engine cut through the night. Riley peeked through the blinds. Frank. He was approaching the porch, confident and smug, a folder in hand. Riley stood and opened the door before he could knock. "Coming to finish what you started?" she said coolly. Frank held up the folder like a trophy. "I don't have to say a word. This story tells itself. Once I post it online, you're finished. Your mother's a fraud, and you're the lie she raised." Riley stepped forward, voice steady. "Go ahead, post it. But when you do, remember this. We have receipts. My mother's original reports, her sealed documents, signed affidavits, every file you found. We've got the real ones. Dated, validated, secured. You leak that, and we leak everything. You won't just lose your shop. You'll be sued into oblivion by the government you're trying to expose. Frank's smirk wavered. His grip on the folder loosened. Behind Riley, Evelyn stepped into view, calm but commanding. You came here thinking you held a weapon, she said quietly. But what you're holding is evidence of your own undoing. Walk away while you still can. For the first time, Frank looked small, really small. His bravado drained. Without another word, he turned and walked off into the night. Days later, Riley returned to the garage, not for reconciliation, not for praise. She came to close the chapter. As she walked through the space, mechanics paused and watched her. The laughter was gone. The whispers, too. What remained was silence and respect. Dylan stepped forward, his eyes uncertain. Riley, I'm sorry. We were wrong. She studied his face, then offered a faint smile. You were silent. That was worse. But maybe now, you understand. He nodded. We do. Weeks passed. Riley began her internship at Morrison Keene. Working directly under Russell Keene and co-founder Karen Morris, she contributed to prototype components destined to power next-generation electric systems nationwide. But beyond the schematics and circuits, she stood for something greater. She had proven that legacy isn't built on secrets or lies. It's shaped by the truth you dare to protect. And as the world slowly uncovered the story of Riley Rowe, it became clear. She was not merely the daughter of a silenced genius. She was a force of her own,